Being on hormonal birth control changes who a woman is attracted to. Let's look into that claim. It's a very loaded one that, as you will see, cannot really be directly answered, but because many studies have sort of played around with the idea, we got this myth. I want to walk with you through the studies so you see how this notion, now so pervasive in mainstream consciousness, was created. So what does the proposition even mean? If we try to break the myth down into more digestible parts, and of course first presupposing that it is real, we can ask, does hormonal birth control alter attraction and preferences among women uniformly enough so that we would be able to conclude anything specific? And is the resulting effect then even remotely altering the human population? In 2009, about 100 million women were on the pill, so it would be cool if we knew if that's what it was actually doing. We gotta back up a little bit to explain a few basic terms around this topic and how people even made the connection between hormonal birth control and attraction in the first place. First, we need to look at what MHC is. The major histocompatibility complex, HLA, or human leukocyte antigen, is the human version of it. It is a group of genes located on chromosome 6 that directs the production of proteins on the surface of cells, where these proteins help the immune system recognize and respond to foreign substances. So they also help to distinguish the self from non-self. They're like philosophers in that regard, except they don't get existential crises from it. And now back to the story. It began with a study done on mice, where these mice were put in a closed society of sorts. And mice smell each other, obviously. But not just each other. They can smell parasites through urine and even lower testosterone levels. And they can smell the differences in this MHC factor in each other. They can smell it in humans, and we can smell it in them. Hey, is this your mouse? I don't know, let me smell it. No. Fascinating. There was a choice in front of these mice of a potential partner, a mouse with either similar or dissimilar MHC. In this study, the actual choosing was done by mouse males, not females. This ability does function as a sort of nature's fail-safe, since similarity or dissimilarity does seem to actually matter in situations like the one in the study where inbreeding was a serious risk. In addition to preventing inbreeding, it seems to direct individuals of any species now into more productive reproductive situations. Most couples who were similar in this MHC factor had 27% fewer offspring than would be expected by random mating. It is presumed, emphasis on presumed, to have evolved into such a large complex because couples who genetically differ in this area have children who are more likely to be more fit and have good resistance to infectious diseases. But you do not have to be worried about MHC similarity or dissimilarity with your partner. It is not a bidirectional indicator of inbreeding. Generally, it is a very large complex of genes that differs in the human population a lot. The chances that you would like the smell of and then pick a long-lost relative of yours as your partner are negligible, though not non-existent. So the progression of research went like this. First, MHC is important. Then, MHC influences mate choice in mice, even though it is mice men who are doing the picking. So next we need to test the changes in mate choice in human women who are on hormonal birth control. I have not found any justification for why anyone thought humans need to test women for this, and I don't think there ever was any. The sample of the original study was 49 women and 44 men, who were all around 25 years old. The women were asked whether they were using the pill. Then 6 t-shirts were prepared. Soup. The women were asked to rate the smells for intensity and pleasantness and sexiness on a scale of 0 to 10. The testing was done during the second week of the women's cycles. This was only established by self-reporting, by the way, so that cannot be taken as hard evidence of ovulation because not all women have their ovulation around day 14. But it is allegedly known that women are the most sensitive at this time. But is it? The study they cite for this claim, its text is available online and, quote, "The lack of correlation between the fluctuations in olfactory sensitivity and the circulating hormone levels in the group using oral contraceptives suggests factors other than gonadal hormones are responsible for these changes." And that's what they based it on a study that explicitly says the opposite. Before the experiments began, the test subjects were asked to prepare their noses. Sounds kinky, I hate it. By using a nose spray for 14 days, and they were given preventative medicine against any potential cold or flu. They were also given materials to sensitize their smell perception. So like books on noses. Someone was too enthusiastic about this. What are the results? Wish I could tell you in a lot of details, but it is a very short paper and, quote, "The scores for sexiness are not shown in the figures, as they were highly correlated with pleasantness, at about 85%. The most important graph of the whole study that created this myth isn't even published. It correlated by 87% for women on the pill and by 83% for women not on the pill. And how did they figure out if the women were at all attracted to the smells? The researchers asked, does this remind you of your ex or your relative? Was I don't fucking know an option? Men who differed from the women in this MHC gene area reminded them of their own partners or ex-partners twice as often as those of MHC similar men. For women who were not on hormonal birth control, the similarity was rated as more intensive but also more pleasant. And for women on hormonal birth control, the similarity was again rated as more intensive but far less pleasant. I have to point out that women on hormonal birth control rated the smells as more intensive overall, so the unpleasantness of the dissimilar ones was then more pronounced. For women who described the scent as reminding them of their partner or ex-partner, 31 out of 39 women said they were sure they had not been taking the pill when they picked that particular mate. What about the remaining 10 of the set? Those said that the smells reminded them of their relatives. The conclusion of the study then was that body odor preferences play a role in actual mate choice, and that the contraceptive pill seems to interfere in this natural mate choice, and could have an influence on the stability of an already existing pair bond by influencing odor preferences, and people, according to the authors, should know about these changes. There had been countless follow-up studies to the original one that became famous, and the results were all over the place. So, is the result valid? No, absolutely not. What was actually tangibly found that I can tell you is that women's preferences, not choices, preferences, so just because you like the smell of someone doesn't mean you actually end up in a relationship with that man, seem to fluctuate around ovulation. Whereas throughout the rest of the cycle, the preferences are the same both for women on the pill and not. Just this change around ovulation is basically eliminated with the use of oral contraception. But is this change, that peak, what makes women pick men? Assuming that it is women who have the last word in the first place. Also, shifts in preferences were only studied for women who were seeking short-term partnerships, and no study, at least as of 2009, and I have not found any now, have found whether women judge men differently when they are seeking long-term partners. Again, assuming women have the last word in establishing relationships, which how would you even gather evidence for that? And also, let's not forget, assuming smell sensitivity fluctuations are related to hormones, which they are not. However, in another tangible study, and there are multiple finding similar results, 10 couples who failed multiple assisted reproduction cycles were compared to 10 couples who achieved a viable pregnancy with their first assisted reproduction attempt. And the couples that had troubles conceiving, even artificially, shared a greater number of HLA antigens than control couples. Where changes were observed, they were observed on chimps. Hormonal birth control reduced the number of intimate interactions of couples, and in chimp couples that were already doing a lower number of interactions before the female got on hormonal birth control, intimate interactions ceased altogether. Preferences go both ways, as monkey males prefer naturally cycling females. If you accept we are like chimps, which is a reach, that does sound like a problem, but nobody says that is related to how it changes our attractiveness and perceptions thereof. Pill users, talking about women again now, and non-pill users do not significantly differ in how attractive their odors are judged to be, but unlike in normally cycling women, the attractiveness of the odors of pill users does not depend on where they are in their menstrual cycle. This attractiveness peak was demonstrated in a fascinating experiment done with lap dancers. Men actually gave more money to women who were not on hormonal birth control and were ovulating. Is it evolution? Is it evolution at work in either direction? On the one hand, you have desiring the alpha for best babies. On the other, you have kin and safety. Both explanations make sense. On to a more pressing question. Does hormonal birth control alter odor preferences once women start using it? In this study, single women preferred MHC similar men and women in relationships preferred MHC dissimilar men. The conclusion of this study, again, seems a little bit forced. They suggest that women in relationships may seek to improve offspring quality through extra-pair partnerships. They're talking about infidelity. And these results apparently are consistent with other species. Women who were not on hormonal birth control had no preference in terms of similarity and dissimilarity, but once these women started using the pill, their preferences shifted toward similarity. They found nothing interesting when they asked these women if the smells of MHC dissimilar men reminded them of their exes or relatives, as should be expected because that was a very unscientific question. The preferences of new hormonal birth control users shifted toward similarity over time. Women not on the pill over time began to prefer dissimilarity, but to a lesser extent than new hormonal birth control users began to prefer similarity. A near statistically significant, which means a measurable one, but just short of large enough for it to count, association was found among women who were in relationships. The desirability rating they gave to the sense seems to have correlated with the frequency with which they reported fantasizing about sexual relations with other men, which sounds just like a pre-existing behavioral difference. And it is reasonable to call it that, as it would not be the only one, because pill users actually used rating scales differently even before they started the pill, which sounds like a super interesting finding, but the reasons behind this were not pursued. In another study where they employed self-reporting, women who shared fewer MHC alleles with their partner reported being more content and less likely to seek extra-pair partnerships. In another study, women on hormonal birth control tended to engage in more of what was called by the study mate retention behaviors, meaning they were more jealous and trying harder to keep a partner, but no detailed explanation of what that actually means was given. Both people in the couple were interviewed, and what if the self-reporting of the couple did not match? Then the conclusion of the study is again weird. Are wild conclusions a prerequisite when writing papers about this topic? The conclusion was that women do not interpret what their partners are doing accurately, or men whose women use hormonal birth control tend to overreport their own mate retention behaviors. Does hormonal birth control change women? Of course, that's kind of what it's supposed to do. But is the change at all related to who they find attractive? No. There is no actual evidence in either direction that preferences in naturally cycling women reflect real partner choice, or better choice, which is what the original proposition implied.